Welcome to Pen and Perspective, where the story always knows more than it's telling. Every word is intentional, every silence holds a truth. Let's get into it. I don't panic, I catalog. That's the difference between me and most people. When something feels off, I don't rush to name it. I sit with it. I line it up next to other things that didn't make sense before. I wait to see if it keeps showing up. Patterns don't announce themselves, they repeat. People think what happened with Walter started the night of the accident. That's not true. That's just when everybody else finally had to pay attention. For me, it started earlier, not with proof, with discomfort. The hospital room was the first place it settled into my body. Not the injuries, not the blood alcohol nonsense, not even the shock of seeing Walter laid up like that. It was the energy, the pauses between words, the way people answered questions they weren't asked. I didn't say anything then. I rarely do in real time. I watch. I clock who talks too much, who talks too fast, who suddenly needs to control the narrative before one even exists. Brian wouldn't meet anyone's eyes for too long. Dante kept explaining things nobody accused him of. Those aren't crimes, they're tells. After Walter got arrested, everybody defaulted to grief, shock, outrage. That made sense. Sandra was in survival mode. The kids, the business, the noise. I stayed where I've always been useful, close enough to support, far enough to see clearly. I work in strategy. I get paid to spot leverage points before clients even know they're vulnerable. That doesn't turn off just because the people involved are family, especially not then. Family will lie to your face and call it protection. I didn't suspect Taylor because I wanted to. I suspected her because she kept redirecting. Every time Sandra asked a question that deserved space, Taylor shrank it, made it sound dramatic, dangerous. Like curiosity itself was reckless. You don't want to dig too deep. It'll swallow you. That's not concern. That's containment. Brian was different. He wasn't deflecting. He was disappearing, showing up but not present, saying the right things in the wrong order. People like to call men like him harmless because they're soft-spoken and creative and polite. That's lazy thinking. Soft doesn't mean simple. Dante was the last one to crystallize for me. He played offense without needing to. Every room he walked into, he wanted control of the temperature, wanted to be believed without being questioned, wanted reassurance before anyone decided he needed it. I didn't confront him. That's not how you learn anything. I let the lie sit in the room and watched who carried it for him. I needed daylight. I needed paper trails. I needed someone who could say the quiet part out loud without getting buried for it. That's when I called Kendall. I didn't dramatize it. I don't believe in that. I told her what I knew. I told her what I suspected. And I told her what she could not do under any circumstances. No theories, no vibes, no maybes dressed up as facts. If you can't prove it in public records, you don't print it. She understood immediately. That's why I chose her. From there, I stayed still on purpose. Let other people make noise. Let lies get heavier from repetition. Let fear do what fear always does, force mistakes. By the time everyone else realized this wasn't just a tragedy, I already knew what kind of war it was. Not loud, not fast, but patient. And patience, when used correctly, is lethal. Update 1. People assume strategy comes from ambition. It doesn't. It comes from being raised by someone who taught you how to see. My father never gave long speeches. He didn't believe in them. He believed in patterns, in repetition, in watching what stayed consistent when people thought no one was paying attention. He raised me alone after my mother died, giving birth to me. That wasn't something he made dramatic. It was just fact. Something we lived with quietly, like furniture that never moved. He worked nights when I was little, then swung days when he could. Factory floor first, then supervising, then managing multiple plants across the region. Not flashy success, durable success. And because he worked the hours he worked, I learned early how to read rooms without him there. He used to tell me, don't listen for what people say, listen for what repeats. That became muscle memory. I didn't grow up soft, but I didn't grow up hardened either. I grew up observant. I learned when to speak and when to wait. Learned that family doesn't always mean safety, and distance doesn't always mean disloyalty. My father's side of the family cut him off when he chose my mother. My world was my father, my mother's people, and the quiet understanding that blood didn't guarantee protection. I became the best of him on purpose, and he was proud of me for that, not because I climbed fast, but because I climbed clean. Larry came into my life during that same season of learning. Ninth grade, same bus line, same corner of adolescence where people are deciding which parts of themselves they're gonna sharpen and which they're gonna dull. Larry wasn't loud, wasn't reckless. He stood just close enough to the wrong side of life to understand it, and just far enough to not let it take him. Everybody around him had history, brothers, cousins, bloodlines that carried weight whether he wanted them to or not. He was the only one who moved like he had a choice. We understood each other without explanation. I stayed on a straight path. He stayed adjacent. Neither of us judged the other. We just respected the lanes. That respect would matter later. When Walter got into the accident, nothing felt immediately wrong. Tragic, yes. Shocking, yes. But tragedy doesn't always mean conspiracy. I didn't jump to conclusions. I don't do that. The first moment something itched wasn't at the hospital. It was days later, after Taylor woke up. She'd been in a coma. We all knew that. When they finally cleared us to see her, the relief was real. Family is family, even when things are complicated. We walked into that room expecting gratitude, confusion, maybe fear. What we got was measured. I watched her face, not the tears, not the words, the pause. Too controlled, too fast to recover. She asked a few questions, nodded, then changed the subject like she'd already sorted something internally and didn't want to reopen it. That was my first note. I didn't accuse her. I didn't confront her. I logged it. From there, the inconsistencies didn't stack loudly. They stacked quietly. Brian being agreeable in a way that didn't match the gravity of the situation. Dante offering reassurance instead of curiosity. Taylor discouraging questions without actually answering them. Not panicked, redirecting. That's when I knew this wasn't an accident with messy consequences. This was something shaped. I didn't bring Sandra into it fully, not then. She was holding too much. Wife, mother, co-running a business that couldn't afford to wobble, while her husband was locked up for something that didn't make sense. Truth doesn't always help when someone is already drowning. But I stayed close, checked in, listened. When she doubted herself, I reminded her that instincts don't appear out of nowhere. They come from pattern recognition. That's when I looped Kendall in, not with theories, with gaps. I told her what didn't add up, who shifted energy when certain names came up, who wanted silence instead of clarity. We worked parallel, not intertwined. She chased documentation. I watched behavior. Two different angles, same truth. By then, I already knew this wasn't something that would unravel politely. And I already knew that when the moment came, I wouldn't be improvising, because I don't move off impulse. I move off preparation. And I had been preparing since the first time something didn't repeat the way it should have. Update 2. There's a point where intuition stops being a feeling and starts becoming a responsibility. For me, that moment came the night Sandra called and didn't bother with pleasantries. Her voice was steady, but I know her. Steady is what she does when she's trying not to unravel. She told me about the knock. The doorbell cam catching nothing. The porch empty. The note sitting where it shouldn't have been. Keep going. That's when my spine went cold. Not because it scared me, because it confirmed something. Someone was watching who didn't want Sandra scared enough to stop, but wanted her alert enough to move carefully. When I hung up with her, I didn't pace. I didn't spiral. I sat still and replayed the last few weeks in order. Reggie's barbershop getting hit, but not robbed, just trashed. Paperwork scattered, equipment damaged, no money missing. That's messaging. Reggie mentioning, too casually, that Taylor helped push his paperwork through. Not bragging, just stating it, like it was normal. Brian being helpful in ways that didn't ask questions. Dante offering reassurance before anyone asked for it. And Taylor, always redirecting, always warning people not to dig too deep. Patterns don't lie. People do. Larry answered on the third ring, like he always does. I didn't ask how he was, didn't ease into it. I need you to listen, I said, not react, just listen. He did. I didn't give names at first. I gave behaviors, movement, the way things had been shifting since Walter got arrested. I was asking for confirmation, for pressure applied where pressure already existed. Larry understands language without words. He didn't ask questions. He didn't make promises. He just said, I hear you, and let the silence do the rest. After that, I waited, not nervously, not anxiously. Waiting is something my father taught me. He used to say, action too early tells people where you're standing. Action at the right moment tells them who you are. 2 days later, Brian jumped outside his gallery. Not robbed, just hurt. He told people he fell. Nobody believed him. I didn't celebrate when I hear Brian got touched. I didn't feel relief. I felt confirmation. I slow everything down. I go to work like nothing's wrong. Still meetings, still decks, still numbers on whiteboards that pretend the world runs on logic. My colleagues talk about campaigns and consumer sentiment like nobody's life is cracked open a few miles away. And I let them. At night, I don't scroll. I don't drink. I stretch on the living room floor and let my thoughts move through me instead of piling up. That's new. I'm changing and I can feel it. Less reaction, more calibration. That's when Walter calls. Burner phone. We talk about facts, what he's hearing inside, what I'm seeing outside. We never say names unless we have to. He asks me if I'm sure. I tell him I don't move on certainty. I move on pattern. He doesn't argue. There's a moment one night where I almost call my father. I haven't leaned on him like that in years, but I hear his voice anyway. The way he used to say, watch what people do when they think nobody's grading them. That's what I'm doing now, watching. I go on a date, one drink, a decent man, good job, soft laugh. He asks me what I do for fun. I almost tell him the truth. Instead, I say, I read people. He laughs like it's a joke. It isn't. When I get home, there's a message from Sandra. Just a heart emoji. Nothing else. She doesn't know what I'm holding yet, but she knows I'm holding something. That's when I understand the weight of this part. The waiting, because when you start something like this, you don't get to be impulsive anymore. You don't get to move off adrenaline. You have to live inside the quiet until the next shift comes. And I know it's coming. When the call comes in about Dante, I'm steady. Because the space between Brian and Dante wasn't empty. It was preparation. I went to the hospital with the others, quiet like always. I didn't need to ask what happened. I didn't need to hear the story. I watched his body when questions landed, watched his eyes when certain names hovered nearby. Fear doesn't need to be explained. When T. Greaves walked in and Dante couldn't hold his gaze, I knew the message had landed exactly where it was meant to. I felt resolved. because now nobody could move like nothing was happening, and that was the point. By the time I got home that night, my phone buzzed once. Larry, one line. It's noisy now. I set the phone face down and stared at the ceiling. Good. Noise draws eyes. Eyes draw truth. And once truth starts moving, there's no such thing as control, only direction. That's when I knew the next phase wouldn't belong to me alone anymore. It was already spilling into the open, and everybody who thought silence was protection was about to learn the difference. Final update. My phone starts lighting up while that tea is still hot in my hand. I don't look at it right away. I already know what it is. I knew what time Kendall was dropping it. I knew what paragraphs would hit first. I knew which names would trend and which ones would slide by quieter, tucked into screenshots and footnotes that most people wouldn't read but the right people would feel. Still, knowing something is coming and watching it arrive are two different things. The counter is cool under my hip. Outside, the neighborhood is doing what it always does in the evenings. Kids yelling, somebody's music too loud, somebody else pretending not to hear it. Life moving like nothing is about to crack open. I open the link. Taylor's name comes up faster than I expected. I clock that bitch T in the hospital room. Brian's name doesn't move me at all. Neither does Dante's. Those aren't revelations. They're confirmations. I don't feel vindicated in a loud way. It's quieter than that. Heavier. Like when you finally see the shape of something you've been carrying in the dark. This is what it was. Dante got arrested the next day. I find out the same way everyone else does. Phone buzzing, group chats waking up, half-finished sentences everywhere. I feel nothing new. Just surprised at how fast it happened. Log that for later, though. We met up with Tyler, Taylor's brother, and our friend at Harold and Bell's. Same booth, same low lighting that makes everybody look softer than they feel. He hugs me like family, like nothing between us needs to be explained. He showed up for her. I respect that. Life is complicated. People make choices before they understand the weight of them. And consequences don't cancel out love. They just change how it has to show up. We talk about his son, about food, normal things, the kind you cling to when the ground keeps shifting. The morning after that, Taylor gets arrested. Finality. By the time the city announces they're reopening Walter's case, I'm already standing in Sandra's kitchen, both of us quiet, the air thick with the kind of hope you don't trust yet. When Walter comes home, released pending further investigation, it doesn't feel like a victory. It feels like an inhale after weeks underwater. He looks thinner, sharper, focused in a way that tells me prison didn't break him. When Walter came to us to say we should sit down with Brian, we were all hesitant. He betrayed us all. Walter asked us to trust him, so we did a few days after. I listened more than I spoke. What I learned doesn't absolve him, but it does complicate him. He tried, late, scared, imperfect, to do the right thing when it mattered most. That moves him, not back into my trust, but off the list. Some people don't need punishment. They need distance and time and a chance to live with what they didn't stop soon enough. A few weeks after everything settled down, me, Walter, and Ayla sat the kitchen table. Laptops open, notes spread out, names that never made the expose sitting between us like unfinished business, addresses, connections, people who touched the edges and thought that made them invisible. We're not angry, we're precise. Ayla points to one name, just once. I don't ask questions. I don't hesitate. Yeah, I say quietly. That's the one. Walter nods. We don't need to move fast. We need to move right. And for the first time since all of this started, I feel it settle into focus, direction. The kind you don't announce, the kind you finish.
Epilogue. Moments that ruin lives later don't announce themselves. They don't come with music or warning labels. Dante almost doesn't take the meeting. The email had been brief, polite, no pressure. Just an invitation to lunch from someone he didn't know personally but had definitely heard of. A name that floated through rooms Dante wasn't usually in. Development boards, city mixers, panels with words like revitalization and vision in the title. He almost deletes it. But curiosity has always been one of his weaknesses, so he shows up. The restaurant is quiet in that expensive way. Linen napkins, real silverware, no music loud enough to interrupt a conversation, the kind of place where nobody rushes you because nobody there needs to. The man is already seated when Dante arrives. Older, not by much, but enough. Tailored jacket, no tie, calm eyes that take inventory without looking obvious about it. They shake hands. Dante, the man says, smiling like this meeting has been on the calendar for weeks. I'm glad you could make time. They order, nothing flashy. The man lets Dante choose first, and that should have been the first sign. They talk about surface things at first, business trends, neighborhoods changing, the way the city keeps calling it growth when it's really just movement. Dante relaxes. This feels like networking, the normal kind. Then the man leans back slightly and says casually, I've been watching your work. Dante's chest lifts before he can stop it. Yeah? He says, trying not to sound eager. Yeah, the man replies. You've got range. You're smart about scale. You don't overextend. A lot of people get greedy too fast. Dante nods, pride warming him from the inside out. I think you're ready for more, the man continues. Specifically, expansion. That word lands heavier than it should. Expansion how? Dante asks. The man doesn't answer right away. He takes a sip of water, looks out the window for half a second. Mixed use, he says finally. Community forward. Retail, residential, shared spaces. The kind of projects that get city backing when the optics are right. Dante feels it then, a subtle tightening, a shift, because that's not his lane. That's Walter's. He keeps his face neutral. I didn't realize you were familiar with that side of things, Dante says carefully. The man smiles again, small, knowing. I'm familiar with most sides of things, he says, especially when there's overlap. Overlap. Dante thinks of Walter without meaning to. Walter, with his plans and his optimism and his annoying ability to make people believe in him. Walter, who always seemed to land where Dante had to climb. Walter, who talked about community like it was a calling, not a strategy. This kind of expansion, the man continues, voice smooth, requires fewer obstacles, cleaner paths. You understand? Dante does. That's the problem. He understands exactly what that means. What kind of obstacles? Dante asks anyway, because he needs to hear how far this is going to go. The man doesn't flinch. People, he says simply. Situations. Existing arrangements that no longer serve the direction things are headed. He lets that sit. Dante feels something twist in his gut. Not fear. Not yet. Recognition. He knows this tone. He's heard it before, just dressed up differently. The language of inevitability, of progress that doesn't care who gets tired along the way. And if someone's in the way, Dante asks, the man tilts his head, studying him now. Then we find a way to limit friction, he says. Cities do it all the time. Quietly. Quietly. Walter's name doesn't come up. It doesn't have to. Dante looks down at his plate, pushes his food around without eating. He tells himself a story while he does it. That this isn't about Walter. That this is just business. That everybody's grown. That if Walter's really that solid, nothing could touch him anyway. The man watches him think, lets him. I'm not asking you to do anything improper, the man adds, almost kindly, just to recognize when opportunity presents itself and to step into it before someone else does. That's the line, the one that lands deepest, because Dante has spent years watching someone else step into rooms that felt like they should have been his too. He looks up, meets the man's eyes, and nods. Okay, he says. The man smiles, satisfied but not surprised. Good, he says. I thought you'd see it. They finish lunch, exchange pleasantries. No contracts, no paperwork, nothing traceable. When Dante leaves, the sun feels too bright. He tells himself again that nothing bad has happened yet, that agreeing to listen isn't the same as agreeing to act, that this is just how things work at higher levels. But somewhere, deep under the rationalization, something else settles in, a quiet truth. He didn't ask who would be displaced, and he didn't ask whose path would be cleared, and he definitely didn't ask what would happen if the obstacle had a name. Marcus hadn't planned on staying late. It was supposed to be a quick review, a zoning packet, a redevelopment timeline, a set of numbers that had been stalled longer than they should have been, the kind of project that always looked clean on paper and heavy in practice. He loosened his tie, rolled his chair back, and skimmed without really reading. His mind wasn't on the numbers anyway. It hadn't been for weeks. That was when he noticed the envelope. Manila. No return address. Tucked halfway under the door like it hadn't wanted to be seen. Not urgent, not dramatic, just there. Marcus stared at it for a long moment before picking it up. It was light. Too light to matter. Heavy enough to mean something. Inside was a single flash drive. No note, no explanation. He didn't frown, didn't rush. Just turned it over once between his fingers, thumb brushing the plastic like he already knew the texture. Because he did. He powered the monitor back on, slid the drive in, and waited. The screen populated slowly. One folder, one document preview. Marcus didn't open it. He leaned back instead, breath easing out of him like something had finally unclenched. About time, he murmured, because he'd been waiting on alignment. There had been a time, years ago now, when Marcus had been the one on the wrong side of timing. Young, careful, too careful, watching everything but saying nothing because saying something meant choosing, and choosing meant consequences. Back then, someone had stepped in for him. They looked at the situation, saw where it would break, and moved the pressure just enough to keep it from crushing him. No speeches, no loyalty tests, just action. Marcus had never forgotten that. He thought about Walter, about Sandra, about Kiara, whose sharpness reminded him of people who didn't wait to be believed. They weren't reckless, they were precise, and they weren't asking permission anymore, and that didn't scare him. If anything, it made sense. He'd known the case was compromised the night T. Greaves showed up. He'd known the difference between truth and timing. And he'd waited. Now the pressure had shifted. The city was watching. The system was exposed, and the right people were tired. Marcus closed the folder, ejected the drive, slid it into his jacket pocket. He stood, straightened the stack of papers on his desk, and turned off the light. Some fires didn't need to be put out, and some just needed room to finish burning. He was going to let it move. You've been listening to Pen and Perspective. If it sat in your spirit, let it linger. If it stirred something in you, don't ignore it. I'm Miana DK, and before I put my pen down, tell me, whose perspective should I sit with next?